All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So, had my auction league like 2 weeks ago and totally forgot that I have a fantasy football channel. And, today after waiting for like news from like cuts and trades and all that other stuff, I was finally like, hey, maybe I have enough to talk about when it comes to fantasy football. Like, I don't have a draft this weekend. My high school league, those guys sabotage that league every year because it's a high school league and it's like nobody's primary league because half the guys that like aren't really into fantasy football, they're just there to hang out with their high school buddies. The other guys that are like really into fantasy football, like this is not our primary league, and it's kind of funny to see where the more competitive leagues actually like seep into this high school league. They removed a roster spot this year in that high school league, that which means it ends up being more of a luck component than it does a skill component. And this is one of the things like I talk about. Those guys want to be able, those guys that are less competitive, they want to be able to go onto their waiver wire at any given time and bring up a guy that can give them points. In your more competitive leagues, those guys are not going to exist on your waiver wire because like your draft component ends up being so important. And like in your snob leagues, those guys will go like 19 rounds, but there's no trading, right? Because the risk of collusion and stuff like that is too high. Um, in my main money league, we still have trading because like we're all trying to stab each other in the back, and we can still do that. Which it is not quite as competitive as I like. I would like more bench spots in that league too. But as long as we have the ability to trade, like we're probably not going to be able to do that. So anyway, and I bring this up because uh, the auction or the strategy for your drafts that are coming out, like I know a lot of people are going to have drafts this weekend. So again, like my news video was not going to be target related, and then I saw the comment today, and YouTube changed the back end, so I don't see comments as much. If you're wondering about that stuff, so and then I don't have the time. I just don't go on the channel either. So like in this case, like I was going to get this done. So from a draft strategy perspective, like always draft your running backs that have roads for legendary outcome seasons or elite seasons. And I go, those are going to be guys that are on good offenses that have opportunity to score a lot of touchdowns. And remember, like chasing touchdowns is a good way to win your league. It's a good way to lose your league. Also your receiving upside running backs, and then you get those together where you have like like 2,000 total yards and or like 20 to 30 touchdowns, and you're gonna have that legendary outcome season. So chasing those guys is a really good way to win your league. It's also a really good way to lose your league. And in the case, like if you always have the opportunity to go running back, there's an unlikely chance that you may end up going like 4 or 5 running backs deep to start your draft. And remember, this is a very good year to go dumpster diving on your wide receivers versus versus your wide receivers versus your running backs. Just with how the rankings work out, sometimes that's just how it's going to go. And in this case, like if you don't have the 101, you don't have the opportunity to go get like your Jamar Chase, and there are only going to be so many wide receivers that have the ability to go up there and compete with your running backs. There's no point on making your situation worse and trying to compete with like a Jamar Chase with an AJ Brown because you're looking at AJ Brown. So there may be an unlikely chance that like AJ Brown has some type of like elite or legendary outcome season, but that would involve like the Eagles offense functioning differently than it did last year. And if you think that's going to happen, go to Vegas. But in this case, like I'm not going to necessarily go, I need to plug in a wide receiver one because that's what's there versus the running back that because I've already had too many running backs. Like you can never have too many running backs. That's like the whole thing in fantasy is you always feel like that you have enough running backs until like injuries hit, and then you're like, where all my running backs go? So that's part of the reason in your managed leagues, if you have the opportunity to go after some of these guys, and I will talk about some of these guys like your Chase Browns or something like that, your Kenneth Walkers, like go after those guys. And then we can try and dumpster dive. Now, I did look at some of the rankings that have changed since I did my auction draft, and some of those wide receivers have corrected. So like, but they are clustered in that range. I think it's like 5 to like 8. And again, know your league, which means like how competitive your league is, how much they're likely to go up on guys. Listening to some of the snobs talk about their leagues and some of the guys that are going up into like the second, third, fourth round of your drafts that like ranked in more casual leagues are not that high because those guys have to be able to hit on those disproportionate outcome seasons in a way in your less competitive leagues that you don't have to hit on because if those guys are right with the upside, they win these high stakes leagues in a way that like less competitive leagues don't have to do that because those guys will end up on waiver wire. So like it's all about those range of outcomes. Guys with higher range of outcomes have higher price in more competitive leagues. So just kind of think of that, and then know your rankings of the leagues that you're in. So like my main money league is an ESPN league. So like those guys are probably going to be hovering around ESPN more than other sites. And if you're Yahoo League, this is the time of year that I start looking at Yahoo rankings, because that's like my high school league. So if whatever your league's attached to are probably going to be one way, shape, or form, those rankings are going to influence your draft. And again, like in my high school league, those guys, you're staring at best available when you're doing your online drafts, and that one way, shape, or form, that's going to influence who gets picked at certain points in your draft. So just kind of remember that, like when I talk about some of these guys across leagues, that those ADPs are not necessarily going to work that way in your league, and you have to be able to know the guys that you like ahead of time, that you're going to go up like 1, 2, 3 rounds. And remember, like you probably are going to be a little bit more of a slave to ADP round 1 through 3, and then you can kind of get a little crazier. And then like I'll say, like after round 5, like the ADP doesn't matter. Like you got to like the guy, you got to know the range of outcomes, you got to be able to go up and get that guy as early as you think is worth it for some of those guys, because like those rankings don't matter. And if you have some of those guys that are really competitive, they're going to know the guy that's already not appropriately valued, and they're going to value that guy appropriately in that league if it's competitive enough, and they're just going to go up, and get that guy. So a guy that you're staring at going like, oh, he's 110, I'll go up in like the 9th or 10th round to get them. If that guy's inappropriately valued enough, that guy will go in like the 3rd or 4th round of the league that you're in, if it's competitive enough. So anyway, let's see. One of the things before I move on to some of the news and notes, I think it's this one right here. So you see that Bryce Young on ESPN, he's 218, quarterback 25, and then your Michael Penix is 200, quarterback 24 overall. And I've already talked about this in another video, that would not be surprising that these guys are end up like this year's like Baker May or Joe Burrow or something like that, like around 20, 21, 22 points a game. Like I could see them, leading the league in passing touchdowns. Like not to say that it's going to happen, just that it's not going to surprise me at all if it occurs. And they both have just a little bit of nimbly bimbly. I don't know how much that's going to really influence them outside of just like a little bit of gravy on top of the possibility you're going to get like higher volume passing seasons when it comes to like yards and touchdowns. So in this case, why I bring this up is Bryce Young going like 218 overall, when we see like Ted McMillan on ESPN, he's going 47 overall, wide receiver 20. So if Bryce does finish as like quarterback 25 overall, he's not good. Ted McMillan finishing around wide receiver 3 area is not going to be surprising, right? But so like it's already baked into his draft capital. Now he may not be as high or as low in other leagues depending on where he's going at, but just in general to talk about where he's going at. So like if Ted McMillan finishes as wide receiver 30 and you spent like 47 overall on your Ted McMillan, and Bryce Young does finish at like quarterback 25, like not going to be surprising. The other thing with like your Michael Penix, he's going at like quarterback 24, and in one quarterback leagues he's going like 200 overall on your ESPN. If he does that, there's no way that Nico Collins is probably going to be able to return overall at like 16 overall, wide receiver 10. Now, I think that Drake London is going to have a really good year. I also think that Michael Penix is going to have a really good year. But the incongruities overall with the rankings are just really interesting to look at. It's like, well, why would you think that Drake London is so high, but his quarterback is so low? And then Bryce Young is so low. That would mean that you would have that equal and opposite reaction with that wide receiver. So there's stuff to be looking at when you look across those things. Offenses that we think are going to be good or offenses that we think are going to be bad. And then you're also trying to predict the possibility that the offenses that we think are going to be good are going to be bad. And then some of the offenses that we think are going to be bad are going to be good. That's really easy because, the cheaper the price, that it just means that I can just throw a dart at that. And if I'm wrong, I can move on from it. But the offenses that we think are going to be good, like I should know ahead of time that like should feel very good that offense is going to be good overall. So moving on to the news, like so yesterday you get Micah Parsons being traded from the Cowboys to the Packers. It's all over Twitter. One of the things is like Michael Parsons is like one of the best defensive players in the league. He's now paid as the best defensive player in the league, best I think highest paid non-quarterback in this case. And then all the stats are popping off. Remember, stats do lie, but in this case, like he's disproportionately, he can like change the outcomes of game. And you're looking at like almost single-handedly a touchdown a game difference coming from like one player because of like how good he is. And I will say like he is ridiculous because he's an edge defender that can run vertically down the field with slots. So you could really do some fun stuff with like your Micah Parsons, because you can play like man-to-man with like speed slots. And then to have him come off the field, and he's a really good runner. Like he's ridiculous. So like not a real football channel, fantasy football channel. That's why I bring up like now you're gonna have that disproportionate change. That equal and opposite reaction. Like Dak would not surprise me that he's gonna end up leading the league in passing and passing touchdowns. Just pay attention to that. Probably not going to end up affecting like CeeDee Lamb's price very much because he's already up there like as high as he is. I think he's first round draft pick, 7 overall, wide receiver 3 on ESPN. So like that's not surprising. Probably there's just not enough that you can do to change his overall ceiling. It is, if anything, this probably like helps his floor, makes him a safer draft pick if you're into safety. Really would change George Pickens. And all offseason, if you've been living under a rock, like all your snobs are talking about the fact that you're going to get like T Higgins, but you're getting him like at substantial discounts. So on your ESPN, and again, I just use ESPN so you guys can see it, visualize it. There's George Pickens going 64 overall, wide receiver 32, and then if you're going to compare that to your T Higgins going wide receiver 24. So you're getting wide receiver 11, but you're getting it at wide receiver, 32 prices. Yeah, so I already liked George Pickens before because of that, and then the Micah Parsons trades like really just goes like, yeah, if you're not targeting your George Pickens, like you're not probably trying to win your league at this point, because we can talk about the wide receivers that have the road to be league winners being able to jump up into that wide receiver tier or wide receiver 1 points per game area. That's like usually, again, your scoring settings may be different than mine. Like 16 points and above is probably something we can start talking about being a wide receiver 1. And we can talk about like the guys that have roads at the prices that are going that everybody has access to them. So the other guy that this would have that equal and opposite reaction to probably would downgrade all the all the passing options for the Packers, because if they have a lead and they're just going to chew clock, and then because of Micah Parsons being able to give them like short fields and stuff like that, this is real football stuff, you have the possibility that you're going to get Josh Jacobs at least being able to return on like the 15 rushing touchdowns that he had last year. So like the over underline is 15 touchdowns. The Micah Parsons trade would probably make me go like, I'll pick the over on Josh Jacobs because of that. So like equal and opposite reactions. All right, some of the other stuff that's out there right now, Joe Mixon, we were already tracking on this, or at least I was, like, should not be drafted, I imagine, at all at this point. Let someone else draft him. If we get different news, you could probably like go out and trade for him with a bag of tricks. He might end up in even more competitive leagues, ending up on the wire. May not play this year. So that's the long and short of that. I'll talk about the running back situation for the Texans later. You're looking at Rashee Rice. He just bit the bullet, and he took a six game suspension because like and I didn't realize, I was listening to some of the other stuff that was going on with Rashee Rice, how bad it actually was. I didn't realize that there was like injuries involved. People went to the hospital, and he's running away from the scene and stuff like that. Like, yeah, like they were going to probably get 10 games, or 8 games, and he just said, hey, I'm going to forego my appeal. I'm going to take my 6 games to start the season off. I will talk more about the Chiefs later on if you're into that thing. Adam Thielen gets traded to the Vikings. This gets like really interesting. Would not surprise me at all, or shock me, I should say, more that Jalen Colker ends up being the number 1 receiver for the Panthers. Also probably downgrades your Hawk shares. Overall, like I don't know how much Adam Thielen is really gonna change things in Minnesota. He may end up helping JJ McCarthy, but there's also some talk that like the Vikings may not be as pass heavy, they may be more run heavy. This is probably more of a Panthers thing, but that trade did occur. No news on the Jaguars potentially trading one of their guys. Like, I was waiting on that one pretty hard. Scary Terry, he signs a contract extension, whatever change with the Redskins. I probably would not be touching him overall. Not because of reasons, I don't know how he hits the ceiling to be able to win me a league at this point. Like, whatever, it probably makes me feel better about drafting your Jalen Daniels this overall than anything else when it comes down to it. Jacoby Myers is trying to get a trade from the Raiders. Probably somewhere along the lines of like a low end wide receiver 2 in real life land, and he is getting underpaid. But like, what are you gonna do about it? They go out and they sign Amari Cooper. And it says right there, I didn't even see that, like, Amari Cooper still has some juice left. That was one of the things that the scuttlebutt was saying about the trade of Amari Cooper to the Bills last year. Is the Bills were like, he's washed. And in this case, like, I think there's a major redundancy between Amari Cooper and Jacoby Myers at their stages. Like, neither of these guys are going to be like speed guys. So like, yeah, we could talk a little bit more about the Raiders later. And then like, this probably, if anything, this probably like hurts like Beck more than anybody else when it comes down to it. Joe Flacco, he was announced as the starting quarterback for the Browns. Not surprising at all, but there was a possibility that they could go a different direction. They also trade Kenny Pickett, so it's Pickett or it's Flacco, it's Dylan Gabriel, and then they are going to be dressing Shakir Sanders as like the emergency quarterback. There, if anything, I would probably say like Sanders may end up interesting me the most in your 1-1 quarterback leagues because of the nimbly bimbly, but I don't necessarily think he's necessarily good. Like the same things that he was doing in college, he did in the second game that are like the things that he does well and doesn't do well, and that's like one of the things like adaptation that goes on. So this would one thing that you could get like gunslinger Joe Flacco, and that would upgrade like your Njokus and your Cedric Tillmans and your Jared Judy, stuff like that. And again, I'll talk about a little bit more of those guys. So Spencer Rattler, he is going to be the starting quarterback for the Saints. I did see, I was listening to some of the guys talk about this. So I guess like the Cardinals, the 49ers, and the Seahawks, even like the Bills and the Giants, the Patriots. So this group of teams that they start off with are probably not the best teams schematically to throw like show out in the field. So like I would imagine like the biggest news out of this is like should be rolling all these defenses you can against the Saints. I would be doing it if it was show regardless, but like yeah, like they may be throwing like Spencer Rattler to the Wolves from that standpoint, and I already talked about like Joe Mixon, so we can move on. All right, then the other thing is with the Rams, if you're going into your season or your drafts this weekend, like I really don't know how to attack your Rams. Overall, like the expectation is like Matt Stafford is probably not going to play the entire season, whatever that means. Now, the other things to look at is like because of how Puka plays and some of the design stuff that Puka does, he's probably going to be safe. And again, if punting is good, punting is a good way to not lose your league. It's also a good way to not win your league. So that's the business decision you have to make at certain points. Like I don't know if knowing that you're going to not get Matt Stafford, if this is going to overall like cut into the potential ceiling of your Puka. He probably still has a very safe floor to ceiling range. I just don't know if you're going to get the ability to have Puka go up there and compete with like your Jamar Chase or like Justin Jefferson, some of the others, even like CeeDee Lamb because of that Michael Parsons trade. Now, you do what you want with Davante Adams. Like he is going to be a bully. He's still a technician. He can do all those things. But again, like I imagine that if the quarterback play steps down, you're also going to get a dip to go along with Davante Adams. And again, punting is good. I just don't know how he wins anybody in any leagues. And then finally with like Kyren Williams, if the offense takes a step back in the first place, even though he signed that contract, I just don't know how you're going to get more touchdowns. And again, touchdowns are a good way to win your league. So that's my thoughts on the Rams in general. I took them off my board in my auction league. I probably will not be drafting them because of the price that you're going to end up paying. And that's why I say like when you look at your Michael Penix being drafted so low, and then you're looking at like your Drake London's being drafted so high, and right now we know there's smoke going on with the Rams, and it's like, well, why is Puka like a top 9 receiver? Why is where's Davante Adams? Davante Adams is a top 30 player, and then your Kyren Williams is somewhere in this boat, 32 overall. Why are those guys that high when you have that amount of volatility attached to them overall in their seasons? If you punt on those guys, because I think they're all punts, they may be pretty close to punts with Matt Stafford, but if you punt on those guys, you're also realizing that you already can predict ahead of time that you're going to get a sub 40-degree outcome from your guys versus your cost. Like, so you're probably going to be hurting there. I do have my stuff if I want to be looking at my rankings. That's why I have this stuff pulled up so we could talk a little bit more about some of the other stuff. And then going back to your rankings to be able to look at this stuff. Like I was looking at this on Yahoo. This is kind of how the video came about. I was looking up the ADPs on Yahoo, and you can still see like guys like Ibuka, Ricky Pearsall, Stephon Diggs, because I'm going to talk a lot more about these guys in a second. Even Tyler Warren, Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden on Yahoo ADP is like 110, which is ridiculous where he's going at overall. And even like Ibuka and Ricky Pearsall going like 95, 96. You could see like ESPN is saying like Ibuka's 75, Matthew Golden's 74, and then Ricky Pearsall's up to 77. Like I would probably even say like that's inappropriate. Like you're going to tell me that Jacoby Myers is going to have more points than Matthew Golden, Ibuka, or Ricky Pearsall. You're going to tell me that Jacoby Myers has a higher ceiling than any of those guys. Like any of those guys, like especially with Ibuka, if Ibuka gets apples to apples what Chris Godwin did before Chris Godwin got hurt last year, you're looking at like 19 points a game Ibuka season as a ceiling, right? And you're going to tell me that Jacoby Myers, any way, shape, or form, has the ability to do 19 points a game. Now, from a fantasy football perspective, if you're not buying risk with the ability to have that guy turn into reward, you're not trying to win your league. So again, like why these guys would be around each other. So even in your less competitive leagues, like say like on Yahoo, like I don't know why these guys are that low. So if you want targets, these are the same targets that we've been talking about. That's why I have this group of guys right here, like Ted McMillan. He's 47 overall on ESPN. Still, like I was listening to some snob guys talk last night. Like he's going like 2-3 turn in snob leagues because of the theoretical upside to that goes on. And I want to check Fantasy Pros where he's going at to see where these guys are going at, and then realizing that like if you're wrong on a guy that's going like 47 overall, probably it's really hard to be wrong on that guy if he finishes a wide receiver 3 because you're paying already like pretty close to wide receiver 3 prices. Um, if you're right on that guy and he does like last year's Brian Thomas, like he's in that list of league winners already, and he's going where's he at, like 61 overall on Fantasy Pros across platforms. So again, like yeah, we could talk about those guys. There's George Pickens right there and JMO. We could talk about those guys going like I may not be able to predict with certainty that those guys, one of those guys is going to win a league, but I can put them in a bucket and say that I can guarantee with certainty some of these guys within this bucket are going to end up being league winners at the prices that they're going. And they're inappropriately valued. And I talked about this before, and don't listen to me. That's the second rule of the channel. I don't necessarily know how like a Zay Flowers or Cortland Sutton take that step with volume into that next tier of guys. But I can look at say like a where's he at? Ted McMillan going higher, and I could go like, well, I could see how he jumps into this like this tier of like your T Higgins, maybe not in that elite tier or that sub elite tier, but close enough to be able to compete. But I'm being able to save multiple rounds because I'm putting my elite quarterbacks, elite tight ends, or just running backs with roads to have those like special seasons in my cart, and I'm just ignoring all the rest of the wide receivers because I could see this clustering of these guys later on in my drafts that I could at least get like one or two of relative to some of the other guys that are out there. So that's how I would look at it. Calvin Ridley, first game I was more in on first preseason game I was more in on Calvin Ridley. The second one, like again, I think you're looking at like an up and down season when it comes to Cam Ward, which means that the offense is probably not going to be bad. I think they're going to be unpredictable. They'll probably be closer to like okay. And that means like you have to manage a lineup with Calvin Ridley knowing that he may be able to give you like 20 to 30 points one week, and then he may come back and give you like 2 to 6 points the next week. So he give you that sub 40 degree day. That's why we got our good friend like Stringer Bell. Like, guys are giving me too many 40 degree days. And that's fine from a fantasy football perspective if they're giving you the massive spike week and they're built into your lineup in such a way that you are preparing for the sub 40 degree day that you're going to get along when everybody else is barbecuing on your roster. So then I just kind of know that ahead of time. And then like JMO, there is likely going to be a slight uptick in overall opportunities for Jameson Williams. Not going to be surprised he hits 120 targets. If he remains consistent and that 120 targets, or if he remains efficient and he gets that uptick on targets, now you're looking at him pushing towards like 15 touchdowns. And again, remember, chasing touchdowns is a good way to win your league. So in this case, with the Lions, yeah, I could see that occurring. But if his role remains kind of consistent, you can see like last year where it says he was like 19 on half point PPR. If he stays the same, you're getting a punt. And again, like there are guys that I think have higher ceilings than Jameson Williams. That's not why I'm not quite as high on him, because I want massive upside. And again, that's why I would generally tell you guys that are out there, and I've said this before, about like picks 1 through 50, do not listen to me. I can be very bad at that. That's like my co-manager in my auction league was like, because I look for upside so much, and he likes punting, and he did the top of our draft. He did a pretty good job. He just did Bijan, Drake London, and Nico. He overspent on Bijan. He underspent on Drake London and Nico. And I said, like, we're gonna win, just based off that core nucleus. And I was like, I'm not gonna get involved with what you want to do. If those are the guys that you want to go after and the prices you want to play, that's fine. And then you got to be able to find that. So like you could get like some very strong push towards wide receiver 1 land with Jameson Williams, but he's not going to have the ceiling that some of the other guys out there. And again, like George Pickens, we could talk about like George Pickens really pushing up towards like a Brian Thomas or a T Higgins type of range of outcomes. He's going to be capped because of CeeDee Lamb in the offense, but it doesn't mean that that's still a ridiculously high range of outcomes to be able to get up to your T Higgins or your Brian Thomas, when like you're looking at like 1,200, 10 touchdowns, something like that, where he's going at the prices that he's going at, and I'm bringing up back to here on your fantasy pros, and you're getting that type of outcome at 60. It's very easy because even if I'm wrong on that, and he's closer to like 900 and like 7 touchdowns, which is what he did last year, that's the price I'm paying. I'm paying that wide receiver 3 price for him to have like what he did last year in Pittsburgh, whatever was going on in Pittsburgh. I'm paying that again this year, but with the ceiling not built into the price. Same thing with Rome, and I have some issues with Rome just because I just don't know how much of the flop that you're going to get, but you are probably going to get a substantial uptick in overall usage because of the Keenan Allen leaving. So it makes it really easy to go like Rome. The problem is with Rome, it's like, well, where is the ceiling on Rome? Is he going to be able to jump into that tier of like your sub Jamar Chase, or even Jamar Chase? Probably not. That's why like I kind of go, I don't know. And then again, I went down on Matthew Golden because of the wide receiver room. It looks like Jaden Reed is going to try and play through a foot fracture. I think it's a Jones fracture. And then part of that is weird because like he could miss the season at any given time. It's just like more or less mouths to feed for Golden, but then the Micah Parsons trade you put on top of that and go like, well, are they going to be in a position where he needs to jump into that next tier of guys, even if he is the number one in that offense? Is he going to jump in that next tier of guys? So like it goes up and down based off of everything, but I could say that he's in that group. Obviously like Ibuka because of the Jalen McMillan and then Chris Godwin. It doesn't look like Chris Godwin's even going to practice for like 6 weeks. I was listening to someone talk about that today. Like there are reasons behind why teams do what they do, and Chris Godwin not going on the pup is because he can't. I don't think they can do like football related activities until it's taken off of. So like if they want Chris Godwin to actually like practice, he can't be on the pup. I believe that was what was said. So that kind of makes sense to me. Why they would not put him on the pup. They would use an active roster spot because they have to be able to evaluate like when he's going to be available at this point. So I can understand that. But again, if you're chasing that Godwin production, because you got to imagine that like Mike Evans is going to do Mike Evans things, like and Ibuka is going to do someone else's role that's not Mike Evans. Like I could definitely see like that 19 points a game going to Ibuka, and then it's an issue of like your price shopping. And again, on your ESPN, he's gone up closer, not where I think he should be going, but closer to where he should end up going, where he's going like 75 overall. I still think that you could probably put him in the cart with Mike Evans, because if he takes that step and he jumps into the next tier, and you're paying it like the same prices like your Tet or your Mike Evans or something like that, that makes sense. And if you're wondering, as I stumble and rattle around, if you're looking at like your Travion Henderson or your Kenneth Walker, those would be the type of running backs that at this stage, even though like they may be flawed, and again, there's no such thing as perfect prospect, those would be the running backs that I would be taking over, say, like a Tet McMillan or a Chuba Hubbard, something like that. Like the opportunity to go like, if I'm just picking randomly with dart throws, like there are certain guys that I would know ahead of time. So like those type of running backs that you're looking at, like again, I'm gonna stay away from like the top end. Derrick Henry, yes, you're chasing bulk volume and rushing touchdowns. He's not going to have receiving work. So like I would generally stay away from a Derrick Henry, but you could see how that would hurt me last year. It may help me this year if he doesn't repeat what he did last year this year at the price he's going at. But then some of the other guys that are available that are out there, like your Walker and your Henderson, that could get receiving work and they could be on good offenses and they have more opportunities for touchdowns. Those are the type of guys that at the prices that they're going, and you see like ESPN like 43, 44 overall. And then on your Fantasy Pros, that's why I have this pulled up. When you're looking at Henderson, 47 overall, same thing about ESPN, and then Walker's like 41 overall. Those type of guys, like Breece Hall would fall into that category, except for the fact that like that's a very murky backfield, and then I have just as good a chance to predict right as I do wrong. There's no news that makes me think that I'm going to get right on that. Now, I know some of you are out there with your Kenneth Walker shares saying, but what about Zach Charbonnet? And that's a good point, because Zach Charbonnet is absolutely 100% a guy that I would be targeting in all my leagues, regardless of your Kenneth Walker shares, because you have two ways to get home with Zach Charbonnet. He's either going to get home as a RB2 because they split the backfield, and again, like he may get like touchdown work, or that there's you're cuffing him, and this is the type of like 13 round draft pick that I would definitely be stashing, like 118 overall on your ESPN leagues, and then on Your fantasy pros, he's like 111, like 97 overall. Like that's really easy because that guy sits on the bottom of my bench all year, and if I get right on that at the prices I pay, I win my league. So that's really easy to get to. Ricky Pearsall, Slick Rick. All indications right now is you're probably going to get like, man. I heard one of the funniest things I heard on fantasy football, all the podcasts. Someone saying that the 49ers are sacrificing all of their running backs to keep Christian McCaffrey healthy. It also looks like they are sacrificing all their wide receivers to keep Christian McCaffrey healthy, and that all that's doing is allowing Slick Rick to be by far and away the wide receiver one attached to the 49ers going into the season. Now, you could talk about like real life land, he may be the number 3 in the offense behind Kittle and CMC, but again, he will function differently than they've ever had in this offense. He has the ability to run routes differently than some of the other guys out there. So like, probably wouldn't go as far as to say like, absolute smash wide receiver one, but I will say like 77 overall. If you're going to be getting him there, probably should be going closer to 50, because I could imagine that he's going to hit like 120 to 150 targets. That's even if and when Ayuk comes back, because he can be deployed differently in the offense than even say a Brandon Ayuk was being run prior, and it looks like the offense may be set up to just let Brock Purdy sling it all over the yard, run those different type of routes. That's like the cool stuff where it's like, okay, what are we talking about with season or ceiling when it comes to some of those guys? That's the type of news where it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. That means I really should be attacking that guy, because when I'm right, I can end up being really right on those guys overall. And then your Stephon Diggs, there's an expectation that we're going to get a jump from Drake May in the second season. I am not quite as high on Stephon Diggs as I was before because of the road that other guys may have to be league winners. And we're going to be looking at like your George Pickens versus your Stephon Diggs and the prices that we would end up paying on those guys. So you may have more of a cap to your Stephon Diggs when it comes to his ability to win you a league overall. I'm trying to find it back. Your overall ability when your league, but at the price that you're going at, you may end up getting like that sub 16 a point game wide receiver. That's another reason why like punting the wide receiver position in for running back and elite quarterback or elite tight ends in your drafts. And then finally, your Travis Hunter. And again, I went from like, hey, I'm off the Travis Hunter train to I'm on it. So again, you got a price shop where these guys are going at versus your leagues. He did not go particularly high in my auction league. There are reasons behind that, because by the time he would end up going, and I can go to like ESPN and find him like 66 overall. This is the type of area in an auction league where guys don't have the money to really bid guys up. So if guys are patient and they put guys out in that auction league, I think he went for like $4 or something like that in that auction league. That's not surprising because he was $7 overall. I could definitely see that someone liked him in someone is going to like him in your league and go up on him. And there's going to be other guys that are like, I will not draft him with your roster. And it's going to be really hard to evaluate him, but he would be in that box of wide receivers that we can look at. We can put them in a bucket and say like, well, I don't know exactly which one of these guys are going to be the guys, but like we know that there are going to be league winners that come out of this group. Now, if I had to tell you the targets that I want, like Tet obviously would be Tet, really getting higher on George Pickens, Abuka, and Slick Rick. Those are the guys, like if I had to say I got to come out of my drafts with those type of guys, like those would be the guys I put there, and say like I have the possibility of having that like special type of range of outcomes versus the price that I would put into those guys. All right. Next group of guys that I'll talk about real quick is, because of the Joe Flacco news, this would definitely put Cedric Tillman up into that same group of guys I just talked about, except for the fact that like you're going to have Judy and you're going to have Njoku. There's no guarantee that you're going to get that type of range versus the other guys that are out there. So like, could win leagues, may not be surprising that he's a complete bust. It's all about price. If you are in a deep enough league that you're looking at like 136 on ESPN, and then I don't even know where he's going, some of the other places, he would be one of those guys if you get that range of outcomes I already talked about, like last year, where that about 10 targets a game that I could see occurring again. If you get that, we could talk about like being able to predict that again at the prices that you're going at. Olave and Rashid Shaheed, I like them both, but that's why I started things off talking about like Spencer Rattler. Like, I like them. There is a possibility that you're going to get it. And this is the real football infringing on fantasy football, right? Just because a team is bad and just because they're going to be playing from behind does not necessarily mean that they're going to be able to give you fantasy production, because if every team in the league knows that you're going to be bad and they can take away your best weapons, because those are the best opportunities for you to win your for the other team to win your league, and then the Saints realize that they're going to be bad, and the way for them to be bad is to drag a game into the dirt and slow it down as much as possible and try and play a very conservative defense and run the football, because their next best player would be Alvin Kamara, and all of a sudden you are trying to control Spencer Rattler from throwing 40 times a game, because that's not going to necessarily win you a game, and you're saying, Spencer Rattler, go out there and throw 24 times a game. And then those efficient routes that you're going to need to have, and again, these are like your yak yardage and your red zone opportunities, are going to be limited. So as much as we can talk about there is a road for like your Rashid Shaheeds and your Chris Olaves to win your leagues, you have to budget the fact that like how many spike weeks you're going to get out of them and how many sub 40 degree days you're going to get, to the point where are you willing to roll them in your lineup every week just on the possibility that you're going to get like 4 spike weeks on the season. That's what you got to be looking at when it comes to those guys versus the quarterback situation that you're looking at with the Saints. So like, again, maybe you're going to get a competitive Browns roster because of Joe Flacco. I just can't see the way that you're going to get a competitive Saints team this year whatsoever. So like, you do you when it comes to your roster. Now, the other thing to talk about with the 2 Broncos, and again, you got to be in deep enough leagues that you're going to be going after your Troy Franklins and your Marvin Mims. And Marvin Mims, I do think, shot up to like 140 overall. As trying to guess who's going to be the number 2 in this offense. And then like Marvin Mims is a guy that like, from an efficiency standpoint, could have a very fun season when you're looking at like Jameson Williams. Where's he at? Right here. Like, you're looking at like 100 total opportunities, but he's just cashing in like a whole bunch of them into spike plays or spike weeks. That's if he ends up being the number 2 in the offense, because it could end up being Troy Franklin, and they could end up being like rolling. This is probably like more of a after waivers type of situation than I would be necessarily drafting. But if you're in deep enough leagues, and again, just to show how somewhat deep the wide receiver rooms are, because now we can go to the next group of wide receivers, and these are probably more like your wide receiver 2 caps, but they're going at prices that like, and that's like your Josh Palmer's being attached to the Bills, and you're looking at him, I think he actually moved up 157 overall. Jalen Coker would be the next guy in this group. Like, again, not going to be shocked that Jalen Coker he's just better at football at this stage of his career versus Tet McMillan, because again, he's already played in the league 1 year. So he's going to have all that experience that Tet McMillan doesn't necessarily have. And then the other interesting thing I heard about Jalen Coker is last year he was playing the X more than like, he may be more of a true slot. And then he also came in and replaced, what's his face? The other Leggett for the Panthers when Leggett got kicked out of the game. So he's playing like the Z, he's playing the X, he's playing the slot. This allows Tet McMillan to get moved around a lot, but it would not surprise me that like he's just better than those guys are, especially start the season. That's not going to surprise me. It would not surprise me that he has a higher end of season outcome than we're talking about like fringe wide receiver 2. Not going to be surprised about that. Same thing if you're talking about like chasing pieces of good offenses, and when you're looking at like, there's Joe and we know he's playing behind like T and Jamar Chase. I don't know why these guys are ranked as low as they are when you can come over and go like, oh, there's Christian Kirk for the Texans, or your Wan'Dale Robinson for the Giants. Like, I would rather have the number 3 attached to Joe Burrow than the number 2 or number 3 attached to the Giants offense, whoever it is at this point. Like, I question the logic behind that, especially when like Josephus, his usage has been red zone target guy. And again, he's competing with like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Not going to be surprising that he jumps in the next tier guys. I've already talked about like Roman Wilson is projecting to be the number 2. They cut Bobby Trees, patron saint of fantasy football. So he does look like he's going to be the number 2. They're not going to be surprised that he out-targets DK. Talk about that before. Like, these are non-draftable guys. Like, Palmer's probably draftable. The rest of them I don't know are draftable. Isaac Tesla does look like he's going to end up being the starting X. They're just like, hey, he's looked good enough. He's made the stuff that the adjustments that he needs to make. He's very coachable. Again, probably going to be like in wide receiver 3 land, but we could talk about like getting this. Where is it at? We're talking about like getting like this range of outcomes from a guy that's going undraftable at this point overall in your leagues. Malik Washington, I did hear this little thought process, the story that we told the BLO Win Leagues. So Malik Washington could end up taking over the role of Jonnu Smith in the offense last year, where Malik Washington is. And then you also have the possibility that you're going to get a step back from Tyreek Hill, and then the stuff that's going on with Achane and whether or not, like, how healthy he's going to be to start season. Like, there's some interesting stuff. This is more like, hey, why you should probably be aggressive more on running backs, because these guys are going undrafted. Even Torrey Horton for the Seahawks, he does look like he's got that job wide receiver 3. And then it's just become an issue of like if, whens, and maybes when it comes to like Cooper Kupp and your JSN. All right, moving on to the running back position. I know this is what everybody wants to hear about, like Jacoby, Crosby, Merritt, Bill. He's already all over the place. I will say, if you are drafting your Bills out there in fantasy football land, you may have to wait a few weeks. They may not just give him the keys to the family car week 1. They may want to see that he can handle the pressure of the situation. And you're looking at like holding on to the football, pass blocking reps, and hitting the holes correctly in a real life game situation. They may want to see all this stuff. So you may see more of your Chris Rodriguez, and you may see like more of your Austin Eckler. He's probably, as long as Austin Eckler is there, he's going to be capped out more than likely in that RB2 range, because he's just not going to get like the full boat. Just kind of remember that. But again, this is a good offense. I think they're predicted to score like the fifth most points in fantasy football this year, or real football this year, is the Commanders. So like having the guy that may end up being the red zone guy attached to the offense, that's not a bad idea. It just doesn't matter the price that he's going, and he's jumped all the way up to like 82 overall, like to the point where I'm like, I don't know, because I got to pay for it at that point versus some of the other guys. But as you can see, like visualizing it on the ESPN board, like who are the other guys that I would probably take in this area? Like maybe Njoku at this point, like your Cam Scatterboo. Or if like this group of guys, like definitely like Golden, Abuka, Ricky, Slick Rick, Stephon Diggs. So if I take like an Abuka, because I have to go up around to go get him, and then say like I'm staring at Slick Rick, and then Matthew Golden falls to me at like 82 overall. I don't know how much I would be going up on a Bill at this point. Dylan Sampson. So remember, the Browns offense is not projected to be good this year, but trying to figure out what the running back situation is going to be. Dylan Sampson does look like the starting running back for the Browns right now. Judkins, like, no idea. He's not signed still. Even I imagine he's going to get ramped up in that situation. Jerome Ford's going to have a role in the offense. Dylan Sampson, if you're deep enough leagues that you got to be like taking that flyer. This is not in any particular order because Ollie Gordon. I picked up Bill Crosby Merritt at like midnight when rosters unlocked in my main money league. 3 a.m. someone in that league went out and got Ollie Gordon. So Ollie Gordon's not available in my high stakes leagues, and I am not the only guy in that league that has an open kicker spot because everybody's just speculating on prices or values of guys. Ollie Gordon's not available. So at this point, like, yes, you're probably looking at the ability to go out there and get like a Jamal Williams or Raheem Mostert, like red zone opportunity guy when it comes to the Dolphins. And even though it does look like Achane's going to be ready week 1, he may be in that like area of league winning cuffs when it comes down to it. So like, yeah, probably should be drafted. The Cam Scatterboo stuff, I will just say, I am expecting that you're going to get like probably like 60-70% snaps Tyrone Tracy. And I still think at price, like Tyrone Tracy, like 80 overall, Fantasy Pros, like wherever he's going at, I think it was this one I want to look at, where he's going at like 75 overall. I still think that's very good price for Tracy relative to like he's probably going to be like an RB2. Cam Scatterboo, you got to remember that like probably would be tracking that like Jackson Dart is going to take over as a starting quarterback for the Giants at a certain point in the season, and Cam Scatterboo is going to be much more trustworthy in that role of the Singletary than Tracy is, and at that point the offense may change on that one. And if I throw in darts like Travis Etienne at the range that he's going to maybe get like full bell cow or close to it for the Jags, again the offense not particularly may not be good this year. And you can see on your Fantasy Pro, or right there, like 96 overall, a best chance. Now, again, you may be a Tanks Bigsby truther, but when you talk about like, would you rather have like some type of ugly RB2 or potential RB1 at the price that you're going at? That's the conversation you have to have with yourself. Isaiah Pacheco, this is another one. It does look like it's going to be like running back by committee. I will talk more about the Chiefs a little bit later when it comes down to this stuff. So, I have some real problems with the Chiefs in general this year. But if you're throwing your dart at the price that a guy like him is going at to hopefully like get your league winner, I think he's someplace around here. Go over to here. So if you're chasing that guy, like, yeah, there's still a possibility that like Isaiah Pacheco is going to get the full backfield, or at least enough of the backfield that is going to matter. And then if you're really dumpster diving, like your Jadon Blue, he may end up being the guy for the Cowboys down the line, especially that the trades haven't been happening. I have heard that like he has been surprisingly good at pass blocking. And then finally, like RJ Harvey, you're going to have to pay for RJ Harvey at the prices that he's going at. I think he's right around here. You're going to have to pay for your 71 overall. So he's dropped on ESPN. You're going to have to pay for RJ Harvey, and you're probably going to have to hold to see what he does at the end of the year. But like we talk about, like if you want targets with the roads to win leagues, like he would probably be there. You're like your Aaron Jones and your Jordan Masons are tougher to talk about because you're probably trying to bet on an injury. And I don't like trying to bet on injuries unless I can I have a reason to bet on an injury, other than just a dart throw or a coin flip. Guys that I do like at running back that I think you may want to go out, especially versus cost, and go out and get. Henderson, I do like. Everybody likes Henderson right now. Spears is going to start the season on IR. Tony Pollard, like full bell cow. And you also have the possibility that the offense is going to be better. It doesn't really matter if the offense isn't that much better. You may end up getting receiving work out of that on top of that because of the Spears injury, especially at the start of the season. And then Zach Charbonnet, potentially RB2, definitely going to be looking at league winner if there's an injury to Kenneth Walker at that point at the price that you have to pay. Like those are the three guys. Like was not able to get Pollard in my main money league. He went higher than expected. But got Henderson, and I have Charbonnet, and I would be targeting them in all my leagues. All right, some of the other guys, like I think Ray Davis is capped out as an RB2, even if there is an injury to James Cook, because like Ty Warren. Anyway, the other running backs there, I forget his name, Ty whatever. It bothered me. I'll go look it up. Ty Johnson. Ty Johnson is still going to be there. He's going to be like in 30% snaps, regardless. That's just what he does. So you may be a little bit capped out, but like these are the guys at the end of your drafts of like if you just don't know who you should be picking up. Go on to this one, like Ray Davis on this list. Again, there's your Zach Charbonnet. Like I think he should be all leagues, and then the two other guys that are probably going to end up being like full blown handcuffs would be like right now. It does look like Will Shipley for the Eagles with Barkley if you're throwing your late lottery tickets, and Tyler Algiers. And then the other guy we could talk about like may have a little bit of standalone value, but definitely would be in this tier of if there is a injury to Breece and then Braylon Allen goes like full bell cow. He's probably a little bit more capped out like Ray Davis because Isaiah Davis would probably have a substantial role in the offense. The Jets offense right now is not predicted to be very good either. That's why I would be kind of staying away from some of these guys. All right, sip of water. All right, moving on to this tier. If you miss out on your high-end tight ends and you're looking at probably, at this point, it's just going to be your Kittles, your McBrides, and your Bowers. If you miss out on those guys, like this is where like I wouldn't panic, and I'm just like, yeah, there's a lot of guys out there. I did like Hawk higher before the trade of Thielen. He would probably be moved down because it's the redundancy and the role that those guys are going to play within the offense. So I would probably move down your Hawks a little bit. Versus like where I would move him up almost into that next tier of guys. And then like, like I do like Njoku a little bit, but we'll get to Njoku, why I would probably be staying away from him if you're planning long term a little bit overall. But these guys are out there like Colston Loveland. There are some question marks about Colston Loveland in a way that some of these other guys aren't there. So this isn't, again, in order. And then Dalton Kincaid, again, you can talk about like the road to being the number one in offense. It doesn't matter sometimes. Theo Johnson, they cut Greg Dolch, even though there's some injury stuff going on with Theo Johnson. And then you're also looking at Russ, but they did do that. So like that, he would be on the road of guys that like would not surprise me at the end of the year. Brenton Strange is still going to be like the tight end one, but there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense when it comes to that overall. So the guys that you're looking at late, Mason Taylor, maybe the number 2 for the Jets, but again, that offense is not predicted or projected to be good. So your main 2 guys, if you're dumpster diving, that are going to be fringe tight end ones to start the season, Tucker Kraft. Even though I think that Golden has pushed him down, because I think Golden may just take over that offense. And then with the Micah Parsons trade, overall the offense may just not have to do certain things. Doesn't necessarily hurt Tucker Kraft's ability to score touchdowns. They may be in the red zone more often. May hurt his overall ceiling when it comes to the yards overall. And then Tyler Warren, because of the price that you're going to pay at Tyler Warren, even with some of the question marks, tight end 10, if you're going to get like that sub-elite range of outcome season, the tight end 10 prices like that, there's just no point on attacking really. If you don't magically get one of those elite tight ends, just punt at that point. And then you're looking at like Ty Warren, and you could go up a little bit higher on Ty Warren if he's like 113 overall. You could go up easily around, because you could kind of visualize the dead spot where you would go up on a Ty Warren. So kind of know where guys are going in your league, what league you're in, and then you can prepare accordingly and go like, oh, I missed out on those top 3 guys. I will just go on Tyler Warren, like 96 overall, tight end 9. And that means that like if you're in this league, like and guys are drafting by the numbers, Evan Ingram comes off the board or is getting close to come off the board, and you feel like you need to go get that guy, like that would be the point that you would I would go up on that guy and go like, well, I have to take my shot, otherwise I'm going to be going after, where's this group of guys at, your Mason Taylors or your Dalton Kincaid or your Loveland or something like that would be my tight end to start the season. And again, some of these guys later in your drafts, when you're starting to look at some of the really ugly guys that are available, and you can visualize some of this, it's going to be those tight ends. Like taking 2 or 3 tight ends to start the season off. Because remember, you have to have the ability to pivot week 1 when the stuff that we're wrong about occurs on the waiver wire, and seeing that those potential long shot road tight ends didn't pay off. It's just really easy to go like, well, I spent like a 13th round draft pick on Dalton Kincaid. He didn't pay off. I can throw him away because I need to be able to attack that waiver wire ad. And if I'm right on a Dalton Kincaid and I get a unicorn, like that's some of the best payoffs that you can get in fantasy football, is being able to be right on those guys. All right, quarterback situation. Again, I already talked about this. If you miss out on pretty much, I'm a little torn on your Joe Burrows, because it's really hard for your guys like Joe Burrows to return on a year-to-year basis, like high volume passing offense overall, versus your rushing floor quarterbacks, and then you get the gravy from the passing works. But again, we have roads for like your Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, Jackson Dart later on in the season to come in there and get like your rushing upside. Bryce Young, and then the bell of the ball right now is Drake May because of the rushing work. Again, if you're in your league and you're stashing your running backs and you can't get your Josh Allens or something like that, that's just be patient, because unless you're in like your 2 quarterback leagues that you have to be drafting these guys ahead of time because of their upside. And again, these are the guys that know the upside. In your 1 quarterback leagues, like Caleb Williams may be going, but in your 2 quarterback leagues, Drake May, Jackson Dart, like Michael Penix, like in your 2 quarterback leagues, like Jackson Dart should probably be drafted because of the potential upside that he has, in your Superflex or 2 quarterback leagues. So those guys to know out there. And then like these are another one that makes it really easy to draft week 1. So like if I get a Drake May, and this may be a little bit of a hard road to start with Drake May, with your Pittsburgh week 3, but some of these guys, like at the draft capital I'm putting into them, if I'm wrong, I can pivot in such a manner that like when I see this year's Baker May, I can go like, well, it cost me nothing. He didn't do what I need to do week 1. I can move to the guy that I like, a Bryce Young or a Michael Penix that may be that guy, and I go, well, it cost me nothing to pivot to that guy, or stream in your managed leagues all year. All right, some of the other news that I did want to talk about before I get to some of the deep news is the Colts did cut Khalil Herbert. This would probably mean that like you may be getting pretty close to full cuff DJ Giddens, like the 5th round draft pick I think it was for the Colts. So that's a little interesting to talk about. Like I was listening to someone talk about like Jonathan Taylor potentially having range running back 1 range of outcomes. This is going to be a little bit interesting about like how some of the other, if they just go like full bell cow with Jonathan Taylor, or if they roll a guy like, if they did a cut like Khalil Herbert and then they have a guy like Giddens on the roster that they did like, and they are using Giddens, it would cut into the potential ceiling of a Jonathan Taylor season. And then the other news that I did hear with like Harold Fant is basically being treated like a starter for the Browns. This goes back to like as much as I like Njoku at the price with potentially Joe Flacco being a gunslinger, there is talk that like Njoku would be on the trade block because they like Harold Fannett so much. So like, down the line, and then would not be surprised that like Keandre Lambert Smith ends up being like fantasy relevant at the end of the year. To finish this off, I did go out and watch like Deontay Thornton tape for the Raiders. Yeah, like no, he's not good at football. I can see why they are trying to make him good at football because of the size speed combination. Not good at football. And that should also not be surprising when it comes to bringing like your Amari Coopers in. And then I did like Jack Beck is not as good, I guess, in real life land right now. So some stuff to be paying attention to down the line. I did say I was going to talk about the Chiefs. So the Chiefs were not necessarily good last year. You could say like whatever you want about the Chiefs last year. I have questions about whether or not they're magically going to be good from a fantasy football perspective. So even with the Rice suspension, it doesn't necessarily mean that like I am expecting that opportunity is necessarily going to be available to somebody else because it wasn't available last year. So just to think that you're going to get this magical Chiefs being good at fantasy football again, just because reasons, I have that's why part of the reason why I'm not high on Worthy. I'm not high on like Hollywood Brown, like Old Man Kelsey. The Rashee Rice injury actually makes me less interested in the offense. And then from the running back perspective, that's what I was talking about. Your Isaiah Pacheco, like it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be red zone opportunities in the first place because the offense doesn't necessarily have to be fantasy friendly. And the defenses may still be good enough that they can just drag a game down and not necessarily have to turn things into shootouts. And they may not have the guys to do that in the first place. But like we already talked about, like some interesting stuff that like, it's just one of those things where I'm like, not going to be surprised that they're a good offense. Also not going to be surprised that they're not a good fantasy offense either when it comes down to it. And then with the Steelers and the running back situation there, like I think that it's going to be very hard to parse out between like him or Caleb Johnson, 3rd-round draft pick, probably more of a rusher only, and then Jaylen Warren, maybe the better guy at the start of the season than Kenneth Gainwell. Like I just don't know if there's a way to say like who is the league winner out of all of them. It doesn't really matter. It just ends up being like I can't figure this out. I can't take advantage of it. So I just become uninterested in it. And if someone gets right because they're lucky, then that's the way it goes. And then same thing with the Texans with the Joe Mixon injury. Like if I have to, and I talked about this before, if I have to go in on a Damian Price, that's fine. You got to remember like you have to get red zone opportunities and receiving work. And maybe Woody Marks gets the receiving work. He's probably not going to get the red zone opportunities. And this is yet another offense that was not particularly good last year from a fantasy perspective. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get everything together. So when you look at the difference between your, where's it at? Your Bill Crosby merit potentially being an RB2 attached to the projected fifth highest scoring offense in real football. And then a lot of red zone opportunity versus you have to get right on a Woody Marks or a Dameon Pierce. You can't get to go back to this one right here. You can't get a Frankenstein running back from a fantasy perspective right here. You can't get this. I don't know. Hampton's there. That's interesting. You can't get a Frankenstein running back from a fantasy perspective. So you can't get Isaiah Pacheco getting certain work between like the 20 and the 20, and then it's not working. Sleeper's not working, and then get Kareem Hunt coming in the red zone along with Elijah Mitchell, and they eat into each other to the point where like you just don't get enough ceiling, and then you're also worried if you're going to get any floor overall with some of these guys. So like at that point, like outside of trying to get lucky, I just don't know if it's necessarily worth it. And that's why like in general, like I would stay away from those situations because I just can't predict if the offense is going to be good again versus like your Teslas and whether or not he's going to end up being like flirting with like a wide receiver 3 because he's attached to a good offense versus some of the offenses that like I can't take advantage of Price in any substantial way versus the other guys that are going to be available in the range that are out there, if that makes any sense to anybody. And then so to finally to kind of finish all this stuff out, like the guys that I do like, again, like I like Tet at the price. I like your Ibuka at the price. I like Slick Rick, those guys that are out there. And then I do like your, where is it at? this one, Charbonnet, Pollard, and Henderson would be the running backs that I do like, especially at their prices. And right now, like not really loving any of the tight ends that are late, but if I have like Tyler Warren's probably the guy to be going after if you're dumpster diving. Kraft is probably been slight downgrade, and then I really do like Michael Penix and Bryce Young at their cost overall, but like Drake May is probably the guy to be drafting in your leagues. And I believe that's about all I got for today. And hopefully, like I said, I will be getting out after waivers. Week 1 should be somewhere around, say, Tuesday or Wednesday of next week when I talk about like actual expectations for snap share and usage by team. I may end up streaming that. It may not be for everybody that's out there, but I kind of want to just do it for myself to get ready for the season. And yeah,